Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so that you know when live we go. Hello and welcome to RAU'S IAS DNS session. We are going to have a discussion on today's newspaper, The Hindu, Delhi edition dated 25th March 2022. We shall take up articles relevant to the civil service examination and discuss them as per the demand of the exam. This article is from page number 3 of today's newspaper. Financial troubles to remain even after MCB reunification. You must be aware of the fact that Union Cabinet has declared the Delhi Municipal Corporation Amendment Bill 2022. The bill proposes to unify the three corporations of Delhi. Delhi Municipal Corporation was divided into two parts back in 2012. But because of the inefficiencies in municipal corporation, the proposal is to reunify them. In our discussion, we shall have a detailed discussion on the problems of municipal corporations. But prior to that, let's have a brief understanding of development of urban city governance in India. City governance, or to be specific, municipal governance, is not an exogenous development in India. It has indigenously developed. The excavation in Mohenjo-daro and Harappa of Indus Valley civilization speaks volumes of the organized urban life in ancient times and reveals that they were among the most oldest planned cities of the world. The records from Vedas, various manuscripts, the Kautilya's Arthashastra, and the travel records like Megasthenes, they all give detailed description of development of urban self-governance system in India. Mahabharata mentions that every town was administered by an officer assisted by a team of subordinates. Reading Arthashastra, we learn that Kautilya envisaged a regular plan of town administration which was especially designed to deal with the typical urban problems. And in his scheme of things, the mayor of the city was called as Nagaraka. Nagaraka used to perform various functions in connection with day-to-day administration of the city. And like Nagaraka of Kautilya, there used to be chief executive officer in the city administration even in the post-modern times. During post-modern times and even in the Gupta age, villages were the basic unit of local government, and there were no clear dividing line between village, gram, and a town, Nagar. Gramini villages developed into large towns and city culture reached its pinnacle in the Mauryan and the Gupta empires in the famous cities like Patliputra, Ujjain and Takshila. But town administration was on very firm footing during the Gupta period. During this period, the towns were generally administered by a council called as Parishad, and this term is still intact in the parlance of administration in the modern times. There was a provision of having elected administrative officers who used to play a crucial role in the city administration. Chandragupta's Patliputra had extensive and elaborate city administration, and the graphic account of the municipal administration of Patliputra is there in Megasthenes. So grassroots democracy, local urban self-governance is not an exotic growth in India. And centuries before the advent of British rule, the stress was on self-governing institutions and a corporate life. For the purpose of the prelims examination, let's quickly go through the development of local administration during the time of British. The story began in 1687 when a municipal corporation was set up at Madras under a charter granted by James II, the then monarch of the British Empire. The purpose was to transfer the financial burden of local administration to the local city council. The local city council under the office of mayor was strengthened in 1720 when the royal charter established mayor's court in all the three presidency towns of Madras, Bombay and Calcutta. However, the statutory basis to the local self-governance in urban areas were given in the charter of 1793. The Governor-General in Council was empowered to appoint justices of peace who were vested with the authority to impose taxes on houses and lands to provide for the sanitation of the towns. Until today, houses tax is the major source of revenue for urban local government. There were incremental changes done in the British Empire concerning urban local governance for next 100 years. But a substantial step forward was taken during the time of Lord Ripon. The Lord Ripon's famous resolution of 1882 envisaged local bodies as an instrument of political and public education. And with regard to this, he advocated the establishment of a network of local self-government institutions, reduction of the official elements to not more than a third of total membership. He wanted exercise of control from without and not from within the administration. He had the vision of external auditing mechanism. These would be possible only if there is substantial financial decentralization. And to establish grassroots democracy, it's essential to adopt election as a means of constituting the local bodies. This historic resolution is regarded as the landmark in the development of local government and is hailed as its Magna Carta. It became the foundation of local government and earned Lord Ripon the title of Father of Local Self-Government in India. These reforms enunciated by Lord Ripon for rejuvenation of local self-government initially met with some considerable success in terms of increment in the number of elected members and presidents of municipal bodies. But subsequently, these were hampered by conservative paternalistic administration at the province and at the center. The political mentality at that time was to increase efficiency. And the political argument put forward against these institutions of local governance is that they hamper efficiency. The number of municipal chairmen were reduced, and they all were made to preside over petty municipalities issues. So the actual implementation of Lord Ripon's reforms were only half-hearted, and they achieved little success. There were obstructive attitudes shown by bureaucracy, but a larger chunk of reason goes to the hostile attitude of Lord Curzon. Lord Curzon was the successor of Lord Ripon, and he considered the reforms to be too radical to be implemented and preferred administrative efficiency to political education. Remember these reforms that Lord Ripon made and the resolution that he put forward, the aim of it was political and public education, so that the nation could be prepared for the final power transfer in terms of independence. Elections, by the way, also proved unpopular as these were not based on universal adult franchise. The electorate comprised of only 2% of total urban population. Later, a Royal Commission on Decentralization submitted its report in 1907. According to the Royal Commission on Decentralization, in order to increase the devolution of power and gradual democratization of the local bodies, the chairman should be elected non-officially. Majority of the members should be elected non-officially. Municipalities should be given more powers of taxation and control over their budget. And large municipalities should be endowed with greater power to appoint qualified health officers along with the executive officers. The initial purpose of urban self-governance was to maintain sanitization in urban areas, the condition of which was deteriorating very fast because of rapid growth in urban population. These recommendations largely were the replica of proposals put forward by Lord Ripon in 1883. And Government of India back then passed a resolution in 1915 for the gradual implementation of these resolutions. The Montagu-Chelmsford report in 1918 suggested there should be, as far as possible, complete popular control on local bodies and the largest possible independence for them of outside control. And accordingly, the Government of India in its resolution in May 1918 recommended to the provinces that municipal boards were to contain a majority of elected members. Franchise was to be expanded and official chairmen were to be replaced by non-official ones. This took shape and form in Government of India Act 1919. Government of India Act 1919, as you would know, introduced the diarchy system of government. The local self-government department was a transferred subject. So it came under the charge of popular minister responsible to the provincial legislature. It's an extremely important point for you to note that Government of India Act 1919 laid down a schedule of taxes which could be levied only by or for the local bodies. This enlarged not only the sphere of taxation for the local urban bodies, but also enabled the local bodies to feel relatively independent. Simon Commission, which came to India in 1927, remarked that no substantial progress was made in the political and popular education in the art of self-government. Local government continued to be, as in the past, one of the functions of the district officer, and it was his will and not the will of the people that operated in the sphere of municipal administration. See, the prime reason for this is that Government of India Act 1909 introduced communal electorates for Muslims for legislative councils. In 1910, the Muslim League demanded separate electorate in local bodies as well. Consequently, some municipalities had been constituted on the basis of communal electorates. The introduction of communal electorates in municipal government had become a great impediment in its healthy development. And hence the Montagu-Chelmsford report rightly regarded the system of communal electorate as very serious hindrance in the self-governing principles. The embryo of communal representation that took birth in the local bodies ultimately attained the mature shape in the political life, terminating in the partition of the country. The Simon Commission did recommend sufficient control over these institutions, as in their view the transfer of power from official hands, recognizing the lack of progress in the local self-governance, Simon Commission recommended sufficient control over these institutions. The view was that the transfer of power from official hands has resulted in considerable fall in the level of efficiency. But there was no going back. In order to increase the efficiency level of local self-government, the Commission recommended for provisions of municipal executive offices. Simon Commission had also observed that communal dimension had impaired the efficiency of local bodies. However, for the representation of minority, the Commission recommended that nomination must be used rather than separate electorate. Government of India Act 1935 gave provincial autonomy, and this further gave impetus to the development of municipal government. The Act abolished the system of diarchy and introduced popular governments in the provinces, and hence the local government was now classified as the provincial subject. Urban local governance is still, in the Indian Constitution, a state subject. You must remember for the exam that no taxes were earmarked for local bodies under the Government of India Act 1935. It was earmarked under Government of India Act 1919. Government of India Act 1935 included in the provincial list in the 7th schedule of the Act taxes that can be imposed by the provincial government, but there was no indication as to the taxes reserved for local bodies. This change proved rather unfavorable for local authorities. After independence, the Constitution of India mandated the state to ensure working of village panchayat under Article 40. But there is no specific corresponding mandate regarding urban local bodies. The only reference to urban local government is to be found in two entries. Entry 5 in list 2 of the 7th schedule, that means the state list, and entry 20 of list 3, that is the concurrent list. The major step after independence taken by Government of India for urban local bodies was Constitutional 63rd Amendment Bill called as Nagarpalika Bill. The bill was introduced in August 1989 with a view to give power to the people and to strengthen, revamp and rejuvenate urban local government. Its main provision was the constitution of Nagar Panchayat for areas in transition from rural to urban areas, also to form ward committees in Nagarpalikas and zonal committees in Mahanagarpalikas. The purpose was also to reserve seats for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes and women, to constitute State Finance Commission to recommend the principle ensuring soundness of local bodies' finances, constitution of a State Election Commission to conduct the elections of local bodies, constituting a mechanism for audit of accounts by CAG, and over and above everything, granting the constitutional status to local bodies. But the Nagarpalika bill that got introduced in 1989, although hailed historic and monumentous, was passed by Lok Sabha but was defeated in the Raj Sabha by a narrow vote of 3 votes. Then in 1991, The Constitution's 74th Amendment Bill was again introduced with largely the same provisions as the 63rd Constitutional Amendment Bill. This time the bill was passed, and this is the landmark in removing the deficiencies that the urban local governments had been suffering from last 100 years, 1892, ever since Lord Ripon took up measures for reform. If we talk about urban local bodies in post-independence India, it has been characterized by inertia on the part of both central and state government. There has been sporadic and piecemeal effort made by them in realizing and recognizing the significance of city government. Even today, the states do not consider urban problems of any particular consequence, and usually the Ministry of Local Self-Government is one of the least important ones. The local bodies still continue to be governed by early 19th century framework of municipal administration. Laws and bylaws and rules and regulations and practices and procedures of that period. The urban local institutions today are considered as hangover of 19th century. The problems of urban local governance is classified under three heads: funds, functions, and functionaries. RBI conducted a survey of 221 municipal corporations last year. The problems of urban local governance is classified under three heads, but revenues declined by a whopping 70%. The gap between revenue and expenditure is continuously increasing. This report of RBI also highlighted the limited coverage of property tax. Property tax is a major source of direct revenue collection by municipal corporations. But property tax is failing to proportionately increase the revenue of municipal corporation proportionate to the expenditure. According to Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, India has lowest property tax collection rate. The property tax to GDP ratio in India is lowest in the world. Previously, octroi used to be major source of earning for cities. Octroi is a duty levied on various goods entering a town or a city. Finance Commission, via its recommendation, removed this provision of octroi by grants based upon the demographic profile. Previously, almost 55% of total revenue expenditure of urban centers was met by octroi. But now the grants, which has replaced octroi, give only 15% of expenditure capacity to local urban bodies. And this has resulted in a vicious circle of burdening people with more taxes and further privatization and outsourcing of services of municipalities. The GST has further aggravated the entire situation of inadequate revenue collection by urban local bodies. Urban local bodies do not have enough functional autonomy. During the pandemic, the leaders at national, state, and district level were busy to take a call on disaster mitigation strategies, but the heads of municipal corporations were not included in this strategic group. Although under the Disaster Management Plan of Action, cities are at the forefront to fight the pandemic. But the elected leadership do not find enough space in drafting and implementation of Disaster Management Plan of Action. We are still following the same old approach of treating cities as subsidiary to the state governments. The state governments still dominates the policy paradigm. Many of the urban local bodies do not have their own buildings. Basic facilities of toilet, drinking water, electricity connections are absent. But above all, the most hurtful part is lack of supporting staff. Supporting staff and personnels in local bodies such as secretaries, junior engineers, computer operators, data entry operators, they are missing. And this immensely affects the functioning and delivery of services by these local bodies. These problems have to be fixed if we have to make cities as centers of planned development. In People's Plan model of Kerala, 40% of the state's plan budget was for local bodies to be transferred directly to them. Important subjects such as planning was given to the local body. This opened up new dimension of urban governance. The Scandinavian countries manage the function of local bodies very well, from city planning to mobility to waste management, by giving a chunk of the income tax collected from citizens to city government directly. If the large urban agglomerates in India could get a percentage of income tax for managing the affairs of urban places, it would really help improve the situation. It has been recommended earlier by various commissions to give 10% of income tax revenue collected from cities back to the city directly in the form of grant. But over and above everything, there is need of attitudinal and behavioral change in the political realm. Cities must be treated as important centers of governance where democratic decentralization can bring amazing results. Presently, cities are seen as entrepreneurship space, where the startups would flourish, manufacturing and service sectors would grow, where the sole driving force is to make the space competitive to attract investment. But effective city governance is a crucial piece of puzzle that binds everything. Cities must not only be seen as entrepreneurship space, but they must also be seen as spaces for planned development. There is an article on page number 1. Government steps in to tackle Russian trade hurdles. US and EU has decided to exclude some of the Russian banks from the. There is an article on page number 1. Government steps. Prior to this, Iran and North Korea has already been excluded from the SWIFT network. Exclusion of banks could make it difficult for Russia to accept or to make international payments for imports and exports. Hence, the Indian government is exploring to revive Rupee-Rouble trade between India and Russia. Prior to this, India already has used Rupee-Rial arrangement to bypass the Western sanctions on Iran, which enabled India to continue to import crude oil from Iran. For the purpose of exam, first of all, you need to have a little bit of idea as to what SWIFT network is. SWIFT stands for Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. It functions as a network that enables financial institutions worldwide to send and receive information about financial transactions in a secure, standardized, and reliable way. SWIFT is not a payment network, remember. It is not a payment gateway. It is just a messaging network. It enables banks and financial institutions to send and receive messages about financial transactions. And SWIFT comes into picture only when you need to make an international payment. Just like payment within the border, you need IFS code. Parallel to this, for international payment, you need a code on SWIFT network. Suppose you have an account in ICICI Bank and you need to make an international payment to your friend in America who's using Bank of America. The SWIFT network enables the communication between ICICI and Bank of America. ICICI Bank will tell the Bank of America that a payment has been initiated, and your friend there in America will get the credit in his bank account immediately. The settlement between ICICI and Bank of America will happen later. If you will wait for the settlement between these two, then the payment will take a huge amount of time. So the payment is done immediately and they do their settlement later on. But the communication is important that payment has been initiated from ICICI so that the debit from here and credit here happens immediately. That's the purpose of SWIFT network. It is a global member-owned cooperative and it is headquartered in Brussels, Belgium. It was founded in 1973. Then a bunch of banks, around 239 of them from 15 countries, formed a cooperative to develop a secure electronic messaging services and a common standard to facilitate cross-border payments. Today, around 11,000 banks and financial institutions are there in the network, covering across 200 countries. There is a kind of monopoly of SWIFT. If you are not on SWIFT, it's very difficult to do international transaction. Russia tried to have its own parallel to the SWIFT called as System for Transfer of Financial Messages. But this is not an international platform. This is used by just some of the countries bordering Russia. China also has its own parallel to SWIFT called as Cross-Border Interbank Payment System. The coverage of Chinese international payment network is higher than that of Russian, and China is showing intention to give this platform to Russia. Now let's have a small discussion as to how the Rupee-Rouble trade will work out. India is still conceptualizing a payment mechanism that would enable Russia and India to do trade without the need to exchange dollars or euros. To facilitate this payment mechanism, Russia will have to open an account in the Indian bank in India, and an Indian bank would have to open an account with Russian bank in Russia. So one or more Russian bank will open an account with an Indian bank, and one or more Indian bank will have an account in the Russian bank. An Indian company, let's consider an example of Indian Oil Corporation. If this company imports oil and natural gas from a company based in Russia, let's say Gazprom, then this company would make payments in terms of rupees into the Russian account in the Indian bank here in rupees. The Gazprom company would be able to withdraw equivalent money in terms of ruble from the Indian bank account based in Russia from here. So rupee will not see cross-border exchange. Similarly, suppose another Indian company, for example, let's consider Cipla. If Cipla exports pharmaceutical drugs to Russia, the Russian government would make payments in terms of rubles into the Indian bank account held with the Russian bank. Here the payment will be done in rubles, and Cipla would then be able to withdraw equivalent money in terms of rupee from the Russian bank account based in India from here. So this is a direct line of communication between the banks of Russia and India without the need of the SWIFT network. Earlier, such a trade mechanism was used between India and the erstwhile Soviet Union. It was facilitated through Indo-Soviet Trade Agreement signed between the two countries in December 1953. Apart from them, this trade mechanism has also been used on a limited scale between the two countries for trade in tea and defense deals. And now the two countries are trying to have a full-fledged deal in terms of trading in local currencies. The problem here are twofold. Number one, you might already been started to think as to how the settlements will be done between the banks. The import of India from Russia is exorbitantly high. The balance of trade is in the favor of Russia. So the money that has to be given into the bank account of Russian bank in India is very high. The money that Russians have to give in the bank account of Indian bank in Russia is considerably less. So rupee used will be very high. The equivalent amount of money will be withdrawn from the Indian bank account in Russia in terms of ruble. So ruble out will also be very high, but ruble in for the payment for what Russians are importing will be less. And there will be a mismatch. Ruble in will not match with ruble out. Similarly, rupee in will not match with rupee out. This mechanism works best when the trade is balanced. On another level, it's very difficult to identify the exchange rate. If someone submits 1 lakh rupees, then what is the amount of ruble that can be taken out from the Indian bank account in Russia? That exchange rate has to be decided. As to how it will be decided, that's very difficult. And it's very difficult for both the countries to agree upon an exchange rate. It is expected that within a week, Rupee-Rouble trade will be finalized. And when the finalization happens, again you have to look into as to how the trading arrangement has been done. But this is the basic mechanism as to how it will go about. This article, An Accrued Price, is from the text in the context section of today's newspaper. This article discusses as to what is accrued, meaning what gets added in the final price of petroleum and diesel. A sudden rise in oil prices across India has been seen as an outcome of global price fluctuation. However, there are many other reasons behind the oil price conundrum, and the authors of the article have highlighted 6 major reasons for persistent oil price rise in India. The foremost reason of all is that international oil price fluctuations have not been coupled with excise duty. Despite sudden fall in international oil prices in the past, there was no cut in excise duty by center or states. This has removed the benefits that could have been enjoyed by the poor citizens. The national level oil prices have been rising consistently in the past 7 years despite multiple falls in international oil prices. If you look into this graph, the red line shows the fall and the rise of international crude oil price. And the blue line shows the retail price of petroleum. You can see from 2016 onwards, it has been on the rising trend. When the crude oil price was falling after 2015, the retail oil price did not decrease. The same happened after January 2020. As a matter of fact, the price charged to the dealer is 26% of the retail price, meaning the price in the international market is approximately 1/4 of the retail price of petroleum. Around 23% of the total retail oil price is VAT, and 46% of it, that means around half of the retail price, is the excise duty. The central excise duty on oil is far more and also divergent than the duty imposed by the states. In 2017 and in 2021, upgraded duty structure of center was almost twice that of states. This yellow line here shows the duty structure of the central government. The fluctuation is also high, and it is also higher overall than the duty imposed by the states. In terms of affordability, India is only next to Pakistan. The burden of high fuel price on consumer as a percentage of their total expenditure is very high. Even poor nations like Nigeria is performing better than India in terms of affordability for consumers. In India, there is a special peculiarity of the election timing. The timing of Lok Sabha back in 2019 and assembly elections in 2022 have played an important political aspect in determining the oil prices. In both the instances, it has been observed that the excise duty was increased moments after election results. In terms of affordability, if you see as percentage of average daily income spent on 1 liter of petrol, this average expenditure as a percentage of daily expenditure in India is very high for petroleum. The only nation higher than India in this regard is Pakistan. Philippines doing better than India, Nigeria doing much better. Because it's an oil producing country, it's a different issue. But other countries like South Africa and Brazil are also doing very well. Hong Kong doing exceptionally well. Most of the countries are doing much better than India in this regard. Within the states, there is much variability in terms of excise duty. Some of the states charge, along with center, as much as 50 rupees per liter of petrol as excise duty. This is a lead article from page number 6, The Peculiar Case of Ladakh's Eastern Boundary. The historical details given in the article as such is not relevant for the exam, but you need to understand the aspect and the areas of conflict at the border between India and China. Let's begin from this point. This is the Pangyong Lake. If we zoom a little further, we see that this transboundary lake has 1/3 of its portion on the Indian side and 2/3 on the Chinese side. Although it's a salty water lake, so there is no conflict over the water resource of the lake. But the strategic importance of the lake is very high. One, the Chinese can use the water of the lake to enter into the Indian territory. And two, if you look at the terrain on the northern side of the lake, you see that these difficult terrains actually act as a natural boundary between India and China. Let's have a closer look at the terrain by switching to the satellite mode. You can see on the northern side of the lake, there are thin long ridges, also called as finger points, because they seem like finger, thin and long. There are 8 finger points in the region, all of them in our territory west of LAC. But 4 have been captured and are controlled by Chinese army. Recently, China has increased its activity around the 4th finger point. This is the border between India and China, but the LAC claimed by China actually passes through this point, claiming 4 eastern finger points. And you understand obviously why. If they claim this region as their territory, then these difficult terrains will make difficult for Indian army to patrol in the region. And secondly, you know that in the mountain warfare, whosoever command the height has the obvious leverage, the advantage in the war. So now you obviously understand why Chinese have been extending the LAC from this point after the 1962 war to beyond the first finger point. Some 230 km from this point of Pangyong Lake is the Galwan Valley. Here, this region is the Galwan Valley. Let's zoom in this region and we understand that what's there in this region. This is the point where the Galwan River comes and meets the Shayok River of India. And this region is the Galwan Valley. Galwan Valley is on the eastern side of Ladakh. It's at the border of Ladakh and Askai Chin, but this region is well within Ladakh. This is also the region where brutal clash happened between Indian and Chinese army at the night of 15th June. And from 15th June to 22nd June, there were negotiations, dialogues, talks between the army commanders. But now we know that even during this period, Chinese were doing installations in this region. And recently, China has claimed the entire Galwan Valley as its territory. The reason, obviously, you can see from the terrain that this terrain, if they claim, again, they will get the advantage of height during the warfare. And that will also make it difficult for Indian Army to do patrolling in the region. Some 85 kilometers from Galwan Valley is Deepsang Plain. This is Deepsang Plain. Here is the Galwan Valley. Deepsang Plain is the only region along the LAC where tanks maneuvering is possible. As you can see from the map, this is a plain region, and this region was also the battlefield of 1962 war where tanks were used. This yellow line that you see on the map is Darbuk Shahyog Daulat Beg Oldie Road. This is a strategic road that India has constructed recently, and this runs parallel very closely with the LAC, and LAC passes through the Deepsang Plain. Recently, China has claimed the entire Deepsang Plain as its territory, and that has rang alarm bell because that will intrude into India's territory, and that will be very close, covering up the Darbuk Shahyog DBO road. Deepsang Plain is also very close to Karakoram Pass. If we go a little north, here is the Karakoram Pass. This pass, cutting through the mountain ridges, this is Karakoram Pass. The problem is if Chinese occupied the Deepsang Plain, that is very close to Siachen Glacier. Siachen Glacier is somewhere here. Let me zoom in and show you. This is Siachen Glacier. Siachen Glacier is very nearby to Deepsang Plain. And if they occupy this region, then we will be battling with Chinese on this front and Pakistanis on the left front, because the Saltoro Ridge is not too far away from here. And this has been the bone of contention many a times between India and Pakistan. There's a place called as Raki Nala, somewhere here, which is just 30 kilometers south of Daulat Beg Oldie. And recently, Chinese army has intruded into Raki Nala as well. Situation is becoming grim. And looking at this, the problem you see is that China is trying to occupy the ridges and the plain region. And that should be the cause of extreme worry for India, because that will not only violate the sovereignty of India, but that will also bring Chinese very close to the strategic point on the western side, like the Siachen Glacier and the Saltoro Ridge. Let's summarize. This is Pangyong Lake. LAC has been shown here by red line. It cuts the lake in the ratio of 1:2, 1/3 being on the Indian side. But Chinese have been shifting their perceived line of actual control westward ever since the Indo-Chinese War of 1962. And the present line of control, which they believe to be the border between India and China, has been shown by the bold blue line. The region around Pangyong Lake is referred to by 8 fingers. Finger 4 cuts through the Chinese perceived LAC. But our claim is of all the 8 fingers. Towards the west of finger 4, there is Indian post, and immediately towards east, there is Chinese post. Recent satellite images have shown massive buildup of defensive positions by China between finger 4 and finger 8, including the ridge line of finger 4. All these fingers are actually ridges. And the ridge line of finger 4 is a strategic position because it is overlooking on the Indian side. Actually, right till the finger 8, it is Indian side. But presently, finger 1, 2, 3 and 4 are controlled by Indian Army, and 5, 6, 7, 8 has been occupied by Chinese Army. But lately it has become difficult for Indian Army to cross the western side of finger 4, the ridge 4, because of overt presence of Chinese Army. Around 280 kilometers from Pangyong Lake, there is Galwan Valley. Here. Galwan Valley was the site of brutal clash between Indian and Chinese Army on the night of 15-16 June. And recent satellite images and reports have indicated that Chinese have built observation posts and also structures reinforcing its position in the clash site. Around 85 kilometers upward of Galwan Valley is Deepsang Plain. There are fresh reports of Chinese ingress into this area, and this has threatened India's strategic infrastructure. In the plain towards the north, there is Darbuk-Shayok DBO road. This has been shown larger than actually its actual size, but just for the sake of clarity. Very close towards the north of the DBA road, there is Karakoram Pass, and just 30 km towards south, there is Raki Nala. Raki Nala is one of the prominent patrolling sites for Indian Army, and recently that too has been ingressed by Chinese Army. Towards the west of Deepsang Plain, there are strategic points like Siachen Glacier and Saltoro Ridge. If we look in the plain map, things will look like this. This is the LAC, the actual line of control. But Chinese have been shifting LAC westward, and this is the rough location of Chinese perceived LAC. This is the position of Galwan Valley. This is the position of Deepsang Plain. Then towards the north, we have Darbuk-Shayok DBO road, north of which lies Karakoram Pass, and towards the western side, we have Siachen Glacier and Saltoro Ridge. Now you see on your screen today's question of the day. An answer to yesterday's question of the day is option B. Artemis program is a lunar exploration program of NASA. Today's question is this. Consider the following statements related to SWIFT network. The SWIFT network is a payment network used for international financial transactions. Statement 2. The SWIFT network functions under the aegis of Bank of International Settlement, BIS. Which among the above statements are correct? One only, two only, both one and two, neither one nor two. With this, we have come to the end of today's session. Thank you very much for being with me. If you want more practice on today's current affair, then log in to the ELEARN platform and attempt the DNS quiz. Goodbye. Take care.